I'm here to help you fall asleep tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? Now get cozy and let your shoulders drop. The rain begins as you step outside, not with the sudden urgency of a summer storm, but with the gentle persistence of an autumn afternoon that has been building toward this moment all day. The sky above is a soft canvas of pewter and dove gray, the kind of overcast that wraps around you like a familiar blanket, promising hours of this quiet precipitation that will wash the world clean and leave everything smelling of earth and renewal. You pull your hood up, not because you mind getting wet, but because there's something comforting about creating this small shelter around yourself as you begin to walk. The fabric settles gently against your head, creating an intimate space where the sound of raindrops becomes amplified, each one a tiny percussion note in the symphony that surrounds you. The material is soft against your skin, worn from many similar walks, and it carries the faint scent of previous adventures and weather just like this. The garden path stretches ahead, disappearing around a gentle curve where massive hydrangea bushes have grown wild and wonderful, their late-season blooms now faded to the most beautiful shades of dusty pink and sage green. Some petals have fallen to the gravel beneath your feet, creating a natural carpet that shifts slightly with each step, releasing the faint, sweet scent of flowers returning to the earth. The petals are soft and slightly translucent in the rain, like watercolor paint that has begun to blend with the canvas of the path. Your footsteps on the path create a soft crunching sound, almost musical in its rhythm. The gravel is old and well settled, worn smooth by countless seasons of weather and the passage of feet before yours. Some stones are dark with moisture, others still light gray where the canopy of leaves above provides partial shelter. You notice how the rain has brought out the colors in everything. The stones seem richer, more varied in their hues, from deep charcoal to warm cream, with flecks of rose quartz and bits of granite that catch what little light filters through the clouds. Each stone tells its own small story, rounded by time and weather, some still sharp-edged where they've been more recently disturbed, others polished smooth by the countless footsteps that have passed this way. The spaces between the stones have filled with organic matter over time, creating tiny gardens where moss and small plants have taken hold. The rain highlights these miniature landscapes, making each depression between stones into its own small world of green life and collected moisture. The air carries that distinctive scent of rain on earth, petrichor, that you don't need to name it to feel how it fills your lungs with something clean and essential. Each breath feels deeper here, more purposeful, as if the moisture in the air itself is helping to slow everything down, including the rhythm of your own heartbeat. The oxygen seems richer somehow, charged with the energy of water molecules and the exhalations of countless plants that are drinking in this gift from the sky. You can taste the humidity on your tongue, a clean, fresh taste that makes you want to breathe more deeply, to take in as much of this rain-washed air as possible. There's something primal about this sensation, connecting you to the most basic needs of life: water, air, the simple pleasure of being alive in a world where such beauty exists freely and constantly, requiring nothing from you but presence and attention. To your left, a border of lavender has grown tall and somewhat unruly, the silvery green stems heavy with water droplets that catch and release the light. The purple flower spikes are mostly spent now, but they still hold their shape, creating texture and height along the path's edge. When a particularly fat raindrop lands on one of the stems, it sends a small cascade of water down through the plant, and you can almost hear the tiny sounds it makes as it travels from leaf to leaf. The lavender's scent is intensified by the moisture, released in waves each time the rain disturbs the plants. It's a complex aroma, sweet and herbal at the same time, with notes that remind you of summer afternoons and dried sachets. but also something wilder and more immediate that speaks of living plants and growing earth. The fragrance seems to surround you as you walk, creating an invisible cloud of aromatherapy that follows your movements. Some of the lavender stems have grown long and arching, creating graceful curves that are emphasized by the weight of collected rainwater. The plants seem to be reaching toward the path, as if inviting you to brush against them and release even more of their fragrance into the rain-washed air. A few bees are still working among the remaining flowers, seemingly unbothered by the rain, their movements slow and deliberate as they gather what nectar remains in this late season. You pause for a moment, not because you need to, but because pausing feels like the right thing to do in this space. This is not a path for hurrying. The garden seems to have its own sense of time, one that moves with the patience of growing things and the steady persistence of gentle rain. Standing still, you become more aware of the layers of sound around you. The different notes the rain makes on various surfaces, the subtle creaking of branches in the barely perceptible breeze, the distant sound of water moving somewhere beyond your sight. The pause also allows you to notice details that might escape a walking observer. The way water collects in the furrows of tree bark, creating temporary streams that flow down toward the roots. The precise way raindrops cling to spider webs that stretch between plants, turning invisible architecture into jeweled masterpieces that will disappear with the next strong breeze. The gentle movement of leaves and flowers as they respond to the weight of collecting moisture, creating a slow-motion dance that's choreographed by gravity and surface tension. A wooden bench appears through the mist ahead, weathered to a beautiful silver gray that speaks of many seasons spent in this exact spot. Its surface is dark with moisture, and small puddles have formed in the natural depressions where the wood has aged and settled. You don't sit. You're enjoying the movement, the way walking keeps you warm and engaged with the changing scenery. But you appreciate its presence, the way it suggests that others have found reason to pause here, to sit quietly and observe. The bench sits at a slight angle to the path, positioned to take advantage of a particular view back through the garden. From this vantage point, you can see how the plantings create layers of depth and interest, with taller shrubs providing backdrop for lower perennials, and the gravel path creating a light-colored ribbon that draws the eye through the composition. The rain has softened all the edges, creating a painterly quality that makes the entire scene look like it could have been composed by a master landscape artist. The wood of the bench shows the beautiful patina that comes from years of weathering. What was probably once a uniform brown has developed character and complexity. Some areas darker where water regularly collects, others lighter where sun and wind have done their work. The grain of the wood is clearly visible, emphasized by the way different parts of each board have weathered at different rates. Moss has begun to colonize some of the surfaces, particularly where the legs meet the ground, creating a natural upholstery that speaks of the bench's integration into the garden ecosystem. Beyond the bench, the path begins to curve more dramatically, following what might once have been a more formal garden design but has softened over time into something more organic, more mysterious. Boxwood hedges that were probably once neatly trimmed now grow in gentle, rounded shapes that blur their original lines. They're beautiful this way, like green clouds that have settled along the earth, their small leaves darkened by the rain until they're almost black-green, rich and deep. These boxwood shapes create a sense of enclosure and mystery, suggesting spaces beyond and paths that might lead to discoveries not yet imagined. The rain has intensified their color until they seem to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating deep pools of green that anchor the lighter colors of the flowers in the pale gravel of the path. Some of the individual leaves catch raindrops that sit like tiny crystal balls, each one containing its own miniature world of refracted light and inverted images. The transformation of these formal hedges into organic shapes tells the story of this garden's evolution over time. You can still see hints of their original geometric intentions, a straight line here, a right angle there, but these have been softened and rounded by years of growth that followed natural patterns rather than human design. It's a beautiful example of how gardens can evolve and improve when allowed to find their own balance between structure and freedom. The rain continues its steady patter, sometimes lighter, sometimes a bit more insistent, but never harsh. It's the kind of rain that makes you glad to be outside in it, that feels like a gift rather than something to endure. Your clothes are getting pleasantly damp, not uncomfortably soaked, and the moisture seems to settle into the fabric in a way that feels natural, like the rain is meant to be there. The droplets on your jacket and pants create their own patterns, some rolling off in tiny rivulets, others clinging to the fabric as if they belong there. The temperature of the rain is perfect, not so cold as to be shocking, not so warm as to feel oppressive. It's the temperature of comfort, of being held gently by the sky itself. Your skin, where it's exposed to the rain, your face, your hands, feels alive and awakened, as if the water is providing some essential nourishment that you didn't know you needed. As you round the curve, a small stone fountain comes into view, though it's clearly not functioning now. The basin is filled with rainwater and fallen leaves, golden maple leaves that float like small boats on the dark surface, and the deep red leaves of what might be a Japanese maple, their color so rich and saturated in the rain that they seem to glow from within. The fountain stone is covered with a fine coating of moss, soft and velvety, in shades that range from bright emerald to deeper forest green. The fountain's design is simple but elegant. A circular basin with what was probably once a central jet or sculpture, though any mechanical elements have long since been removed or ceased to function. The stone appears to be limestone or perhaps sandstone, weathered to a beautiful cream color with darker streaks where minerals have stained the surface over time. The rain has brought out all these subtle variations in color and texture, turning the fountain into a natural sculpture that's beautiful in its current state of gentle decay and repurposing. You find yourself drawn to lean closer, to observe how the raindrops create perfect circles on the water's surface, each one expanding in gentle rings that intersect with others in patterns that constantly shift and change. There's something hypnotic about watching this, the way each drop is both its own small event and part of a larger, ongoing performance. The mathematics of the expanding circles, the way they interact when they meet, the temporary nature of each pattern. It's like watching a live demonstration of principles that govern everything from pond ripples to sound waves to the expansion of the universe itself. The floating leaves add another layer of complexity to this natural mandala. They move slightly in response to the impact of raindrops, creating ever-changing compositions on the water's surface. Some leaves are perfect specimens, their shapes and colors untouched by decay. Others show the beautiful patterns of decomposition, holes eaten by insects, edges browning where the leaf is beginning its return to the soil, veins becoming more prominent as the leaf tissue between them breaks down. The sound of the rain here is layered. There's the soft patter on the leaves overhead, the slightly different note it makes when it hits the stone of the fountain, the gentle plinking as drops fall into the collected water, and underneath it all, the almost subsonic whisper of rain falling on soil and grass and the countless surfaces that make up this garden world. Each surface adds its own voice to this rain symphony, creating a complex audio environment that changes subtly as you move and as the rain intensity varies. You straighten and continue walking, your pace naturally slow and contemplative. The path ahead seems to widen slightly, and you can see that it opens into what might be a small clearing or perhaps a wider section of the garden. But there's no hurry to reach it. Each step, each moment along this path, feels complete in itself. The journey is not about reaching a destination, but about being fully present for each moment of discovery, each small revelation that the garden offers. The gravel beneath your feet continues to tell its story with each step. Some areas are more densely packed, creating a firmer surface that produces a sharper sound when you walk. Other sections are looser, allowing your feet to sink slightly into the stones, creating a softer, more muffled sound. The rain has begun to create tiny temporary streams in some areas where the path has slight depressions, and you can hear the gentle trickling of water finding its way to lower ground. To your right, a climbing rose has grown up and over what was probably once a trellis but is now almost completely hidden beneath the vigorous growth of the plant. The roses are finished blooming for the season, but the hips that remain are beautiful in their own right. Small, round fruits in shades of deep red and orange, some still glossy, others beginning to take on the matte finish of fruit that will soon provide food for birds. The thorny canes glisten with moisture, and you can see how the rain has collected in the small cups formed where leaves meet stem. This rose has clearly been growing here for many years, its canes thick and woody at the base, creating a substantial framework that supports the newer growth above. The original trellis or support structure is barely visible now, completely integrated into the plant's own architecture. It's a beautiful example of how gardens evolve over time, how human intentions and natural processes can collaborate to create something more interesting than either could achieve alone. The rose hips catch your attention particularly. They're like small jewels scattered throughout the plant, each one perfectly formed and glowing with its own internal light. Some are perfectly round, others more elongated, and they range in color from bright orange red to deep burgundy. The rain has given them an extra glossiness that makes them seem almost artificial in their perfection, like decorative elements placed by a garden designer rather than the natural fruit of the plant. There's a wild quality to this rose now, the way it's grown beyond its original boundaries and claimed space according to its own logic rather than any human design. It's beautiful this way, generous and unrestrained, creating its own architecture of curves and tangles that has a natural grace no pruning could improve upon. The canes arch and weave through each other and through neighboring plants, creating living sculptures that change with each season's growth. Some of the rose canes have grown so long that they've created natural archways over parts of the path, forcing you to duck slightly as you pass beneath them. The sensation of walking under this living tunnel is intimate and magical, like being embraced by the garden itself. Drops of water fall from the canes above, landing on your hood and shoulders with gentle taps that add their own rhythm to the ongoing percussion of the rain. The gravel beneath your feet changes texture slightly as you walk, becoming a bit finer, mixed here and there with fallen leaves that have begun their slow transformation back into soil. Your footsteps make a slightly different sound now, softer, more muffled. The rain has begun to work its way through the layers of vegetation above, reaching the path in larger, more intermittent drops that land with gentle splashes. This change in the path's composition tells the story of the garden's ecosystem at work. The leaves that fall here don't get raked away but are allowed to decompose naturally, adding organic matter to the soil and creating habitat for countless small creatures. The rain accelerates this process, helping to break down the cellular structure of the leaves and begin their transformation into the rich humus that feeds the garden's plants. You can see evidence of this decomposition everywhere. Leaves in various stages of breakdown, from fresh fallen specimens that still hold their original colors and shapes to others that have been reduced to delicate skeletons of veins, to still others that have begun to merge with the soil itself. It's a beautiful reminder of the cycles that govern all life, the way nothing is ever truly lost, but only transformed into new forms of beauty and utility. A small side path branches off to the left, barely visible between what look like two large shrubs that might be lilacs, their branches heavy with moisture. The little path disappears quickly into the green depths of the garden, and while you're curious about where it might lead, you're content to continue on your current route. There's something to be said for following the main path, for trusting that it will show you what you need to see. But the existence of this side path adds to the sense of mystery and possibility that permeates this garden. It suggests that there are always other routes to explore, other discoveries to be made, other perspectives to be gained. The garden reveals itself slowly, requiring multiple visits and different approaches to fully appreciate its complexity and richness. This side path might lead to a hidden corner with its own special character, or perhaps to a utility area where the practical work of the garden is carried out, or maybe simply to another route through the same areas you'll see from the main path. The lilac bushes that flank this mysterious path are magnificent specimens, clearly mature and well established. Their branches create a natural archway over the entrance to the side path, and even though their spring blooming season is long past, you can imagine how spectacular this entrance must be when the bushes are covered with their fragrant purple flowers. Now, their leaves are dark green and glossy with rain, and the overall effect is of a secret door in a fairy tale, promising adventures and discoveries for those brave enough to explore. The main path continues its gentle meander, and you can see that it's leading toward what appears to be a more open area where the light seems a bit brighter, though still filtered through the overcast sky. The rain continues its steady presence, and you realize that you've completely settled into its rhythm. Your body feels relaxed, your breathing is deep and even, and there's a sense of timelessness that has settled over everything. This settling into the rhythm of the rain feels like a form of meditation, a way of synchronizing your own internal rhythms with the natural patterns around you. Your footsteps have found their own pace, neither hurried nor dawdling, but perfectly matched to the contemplative mood that the weather and the garden have created together. Your heartbeat seems to echo the gentle patter of raindrops, and your breathing has deepened and slowed to match the peaceful atmosphere. The sense of timelessness is particularly profound. Without the usual markers of urban life, traffic sounds, the urgency of schedules, the visual noise of signs and advertisements, time takes on a different quality. It becomes elastic, measured not by clocks but by the rhythm of footsteps, the patterns of rain on leaves, the gradual changes in light as the afternoon progresses. Minutes might pass like hours, or hours like minutes. It doesn't matter because there's nowhere else you need to be and nothing else you need to do except be present for this experience. A movement catches your eye. A small bird, probably a robin, lands on a branch of what looks like an old apple tree. The bird doesn't seem bothered by the rain at all, simply settling into its feathers and occasionally turning its head to observe you with one bright eye. There's something companionable about its presence, as if you're both simply inhabitants of this garden world, each going about your business of being present in this rain-washed afternoon. The robin's feathers are slightly ruffled by the moisture, but it appears completely comfortable in the rain. Birds, of course, are designed to handle weather in ways that humans are not, but there's something inspiring about its casual acceptance of the conditions. It doesn't seek shelter or appear distressed by the water. Instead, it seems to be going about its normal routine, perhaps even enjoying the way the rain brings earthworms to the surface or makes insects easier to catch. You watch as the robin occasionally shakes itself, sending a small spray of water droplets flying, then settles back into its relaxed posture. Its bright orange breast stands out vividly against the muted colors of the rainy garden, like a small flame that refuses to be dampened by the weather. The bird's presence adds life and movement to the scene, a reminder that this garden is home to countless creatures who live their daily lives here regardless of human visitors. The apple tree is gnarled and clearly old, its trunk thick and textured with deep furrows in the bark. A few late apples still hang from the branches, small and probably not the sweet, perfect fruit you'd find in a store, but beautiful in their own way, russet and red and yellow-green. With the honest imperfections of fruit that has grown wild and without human intervention. Some have fallen to the ground around the base of the tree, where they're slowly returning to the earth, providing food for insects and small creatures. This old apple tree has the character that comes only with age and the freedom to grow according to its own nature rather than human pruning and shaping. Its branches reach in all directions, creating a complex architecture that provides perches for birds, support for climbing plants, and shelter for countless small creatures. The bark is a landscape in miniature, with crevices that collect rain and provide habitat for moss and lichen, in smooth areas where the tree has shed its outer layers to reveal the younger bark beneath. The apples that remain on the tree are clearly intended more for wildlife than for human consumption. They're small and irregularly shaped, with the kind of imperfections that commercial agriculture has bred out of modern fruit varieties. But they're beautiful in their honesty, their connection to older varieties that valued hardiness and flavor over perfect appearance. The rain has washed them clean and given them a glossy shine that makes them look like ornaments hanging in the garden's natural decorations. You walk closer to the tree, drawn by its presence and the way the rain streams down its trunk in small rivulets. The bark is dark with moisture, almost black in places, and you can see how moss has found footholds in the crevices, creating small gardens in miniature along the tree's surface. Your hand reaches out almost without conscious decision, and you touch the bark gently, feeling its rough texture, the way the rain has made it slightly slippery under your fingers. The contact feels grounding, connecting you to this living thing that has stood in this spot through countless seasons, through rains like this one in hot summer days in the quiet of winter snow. There's something humbling about touching a tree, about being reminded of the longer rhythms of growth and change that operate on a timescale so much larger than your own daily concerns. This tree was probably planted decades ago, perhaps by someone who is no longer alive, and it will likely continue growing long after your own life has ended. The bark under your hand tells stories of all the seasons this tree has weathered. You can feel the raised ridges where new growth has pushed up from beneath, the smooth areas where ice or wind has worn the surface clean, the places where insects have left their marks in the form of tiny holes or raised burrows. The rain has made all these textures more pronounced, easier to feel and appreciate. Your fingers trace the patterns almost automatically, reading the tree's history through touch. You let your hand fall back to your side and continue walking, carrying with you the memory of that textured bark, the sense of connection to something rooted and enduring. The path curves again, more gently this time, and you can see that you're approaching what does indeed appear to be a clearing of sorts, though it's not entirely open. Rather, it's a space where the plantings are lower, where you can see more sky, where the sense of enclosure that has characterized the path so far opens up into something more expansive. This transition from the enclosed, intimate feeling of the path you've been following to the more open space ahead creates a sense of anticipation. Garden designers know the power of these transitions, the way they can create emotional responses and direct attention. The contrast between enclosure and openness, between the detailed focus required for close observation and the broader perspective possible in open spaces, adds drama and interest to the garden experience. The rain seems to intensify slightly as you enter this more open space, though it's still gentle, still the kind of rain that feels nurturing rather than invasive. You can hear it more clearly now, the way it sounds different when it falls on different surfaces, the soft percussion on the broader leaves of what might be hostas growing in shadier spots, the sharper patter on the gravel, The almost musical note it makes when it hits what appears to be a small metal garden ornament, perhaps a wind chime that hangs motionless in the still air. The increased openness allows you to see the sky more clearly, and you notice the subtle variations in the gray overcast. Some areas are lighter, suggesting thinner cloud cover, while others are darker and more dense. The clouds move slowly across the sky, creating a constantly changing ceiling above the garden. The rain seems to come in very gentle waves, sometimes a bit lighter, sometimes slightly more insistent, following patterns that you can't quite predict but that add rhythm and variation to the experience. The clearing is roughly circular, with the path you've been following continuing around its perimeter. In the center, there's what was probably once a formal flower bed, though now it's grown into something more naturalistic. You can see the remnants of structure, perhaps some edging stones, mostly hidden now beneath layers of organic matter. But what dominates is the beautiful wildness of plants that have seeded themselves and grown according to their own preferences. This central bed has become a wonderful example of how gardens can evolve when allowed to follow natural processes rather than rigid maintenance schedules. The original design probably called for specific plants in specific locations, changed out seasonally to maintain a particular look. But what has developed instead is a dynamic ecosystem where plants succeed or fail based on their adaptation to the specific conditions of soil, moisture, light, and competition with their neighbors. Tall grasses wave gently in the barely perceptible breeze, their seed heads heavy with moisture. Some are golden, others have a purple tinge, and they create texture and movement even in the stillness of this rain-quiet afternoon. Among them, you can make out the shapes of flowers that have finished their bloom but still hold their architectural interest. The dark seed heads of what might be echinacea, standing tall and proud even in their dormancy, and the delicate, branching skeletons of plants whose summer abundance has given way to autumn's more subtle beauty. These seed heads and dried flower stalks represent the garden's provision for wildlife through the winter months. They contain seeds that will feed birds, and their hollow stems provide shelter for beneficial insects. The rain beads on their surfaces, highlighting their intricate structures and creating temporary jewelry that makes them even more beautiful than they were in their flowering prime. There's a lesson here about finding beauty in all seasons, about appreciating the different kinds of grace that plants offer throughout their annual cycles. The grasses deserve particular attention, as they become such an important part of contemporary garden design for good reason. They provide movement and sound even in the slightest breeze, they change dramatically with the seasons, and they require minimal maintenance while providing maximum impact. The rain has darkened their colors and emphasized their textures, making each clump into a distinct element in the overall composition. You choose to walk around the perimeter of this clearing, following the path as it curves around the space. From this vantage point, you can see back into the garden areas you've walked through, though they look different from this perspective, more mysterious, more layered, as if you're seeing the secret depths that weren't visible when you were walking among them. This new perspective reveals the thoughtfulness of the garden's design, even in its current naturalized state. From here, you can see how the different areas create a sequence of experiences, each with its own character but all connected by the thread of the path and the consistent presence of mature trees and shrubs that provide structure and continuity. The garden doesn't just happen. It unfolds according to principles of design that create interest, surprise, and satisfaction. The view back also shows you how the rain has unified everything, creating a cohesive atmosphere that ties together elements that might seem disparate in other weather. The gray light and the glossy surfaces created by moisture make everything harmonious, like a watercolor painting where all the colors have been mixed with the same medium. This is part of the magic of rain in gardens. It reveals the underlying unity that connects all growing things. The rain continues its gentle work, and you notice how it's bringing out scents that you hadn't been aware of before. There's the green smell of wet grass, the earthier aroma of soil that's receiving this moisture gratefully, and something floral and sweet that might be coming from a late blooming plant hidden somewhere in the mixed borders. The air feels thick with these scents, rich and complex in a way that makes you want to breathe more deeply, to take in as much of this rain-washed atmosphere as possible. Scent in gardens is often overlooked in favor of visual elements, but rain has a way of awakening and intensifying fragrances that might go unnoticed in drier conditions. The moisture in the air helps carry scent molecules more effectively, and the rain itself releases aromatic compounds from leaves and soil that create complex and constantly changing bouquets. It's like walking through a natural perfumery where the fragrances blend and separate and combine again in endless variations. The sweet floral scent seems to be coming from somewhere ahead on your circuit of the clearing, and you find yourself paying more attention to your sense of smell as you walk. This heightened awareness of scent adds another layer to the experience, another way of connecting with the garden beyond the visual and auditory. Smell is perhaps our most primitive sense, the one most directly connected to memory and emotion, and engaging it more fully makes the experience more immersive and memorable. As you complete your circuit of the clearing, the path leads you toward what appears to be another section of the garden, this one perhaps a bit more structured than what you've seen so far. You can make out what look like more defined borders, and there's something that might be a small structure, perhaps a garden shed or maybe a gazebo, visible through the rain and the intervening vegetation. The transition toward more structure creates a sense of anticipation, a feeling that you're about to discover something different and perhaps more intentionally designed. This is one of the pleasures of garden exploration, the way each area can have its own personality while still being part of a larger whole. The best gardens offer this kind of variety, creating a journey that includes different moods and experiences while maintaining an overall sense of coherence. But before you reach that area, the path takes you past a small pond, so perfectly integrated into the landscape that you almost don't notice it at first. It's not large, maybe 6 feet across at its widest point, and it's clearly a natural feature rather than something formally constructed. The surface is dark and still, disturbed only by the gentle impact of raindrops that create those same perfect circles you observed at the fountain, though here they seem even more magical, like nature's own meditation on the beauty of simple, repetitive patterns. This pond appears to be fed by natural drainage from the surrounding garden, and perhaps by a small spring or seasonal stream. The water level looks perfect for this time of year, neither overfull nor too low, suggesting that it's found its natural equilibrium with the landscape around it. The rain adds to this water continuously, but so gently that it doesn't disturb the pond's essential stillness and peace. The edges of the pond are soft and organic, lined with plants that clearly love having their feet in water. You can see the broad, heart-shaped leaves of what might be wild ginger, and the more upright forms of what could be cattails or some similar wetland plant. Everything here has that lush, satisfied look of vegetation that has found its perfect growing conditions. These wetland plants create their own microclimate around the pond, one that's even more humid and lush than the already moist conditions created by the rain. Their leaves are particularly glossy and green, and many show the kind of vigorous growth that comes from abundant water and rich, organic soil. Some have grown large enough to create their own small pools of shade on the water's surface, adding to the pond's natural complexity. You stop walking and simply stand beside the pond for a while, watching the rain create its patterns on the water's surface. There's something deeply soothing about this, the repetitive nature of it, the way each drop creates its perfect circle and then disappears as new ones take its place. It's like watching a meditation in action, a reminder of how beauty can be found in the simplest, most ephemeral moments. The patterns created by the raindrops are constantly changing, but also somehow eternal. Each circle is unique, appearing in a slightly different location, interacting with others in ways that create new patterns, then disappearing to make way for the next wave of circles. It's a perfect metaphor for impermanence and renewal, for the way life is constantly changing while also maintaining certain essential patterns and rhythms. Standing here beside this pond, you become aware of time in a different way. The circles appear and disappear on a timescale of seconds, but the pond itself has probably been here for years or decades, slowly evolving as sediment accumulates and plants grow and die back and grow again. The garden around it operates on still different timescales, the perennials dying back and returning each year, the shrubs growing slowly larger and more mature, the trees adding rings and height and character decade by decade. The sound of the rain on the water is different from the other rain sounds you've been hearing, softer, more subtle, like a whispered percussion that sits underneath the more obvious sounds of rain on leaves and gravel. You find yourself listening specifically for it, tuning your attention to this quiet layer of the overall rain symphony. It's the sound of water returning to water, of the completion of one small part of the endless cycle that moves moisture from sea to sky to earth and back again. A small fish surfaces briefly in the center of the pond, creating rings that intersect with those made by the falling rain. The fish disappears almost immediately, but its brief appearance adds another layer to the sense of life and activity that exists quietly in this garden world. You wonder what other small dramas and daily routines are playing out unseen among the plants and in the soil beneath your feet. The presence of fish suggests that this pond is more than just a decorative feature. It's a functioning ecosystem that supports aquatic life. The fish probably help control mosquito larvae and other unwanted insects, while their waste provides nutrients for the aquatic plants. It's another example of how the best garden features serve multiple purposes, providing beauty while also supporting the complex web of relationships that make a garden truly alive. The path continues past the pond, leading toward that structure you glimpsed earlier. As you get closer, you can see that it's a small garden shed, weathered and beautiful, with cedar shingles that have aged to a soft gray-brown and a roof that's probably providing shelter to any number of small creatures on this rainy afternoon. Ivy or some similar climbing plant has made its way up one side of the building, creating a living wall that blurs the line between human construction and natural growth. This shed has clearly been here for many years, long enough to become truly integrated into the garden's ecosystem. The weathering of its materials has given it a patina that no new construction could achieve, and the way plants have grown up and around it makes it seem like a natural outgrowth of the landscape rather than an intrusion upon it. It's a perfect example of how garden structures can age gracefully when they're built from appropriate materials and allowed to weather naturally. The climbing plant. You can see now that it's probably a Virginia creeper or perhaps a wild grapevine, has created a tapestry of green that covers much of the shed's visible wall. The rain has made the leaves particularly lustrous, and you can see how water collects in the natural cups formed where the vine's tendrils attach to the building. In a few weeks, this vine will probably turn brilliant colors before dropping its leaves for winter, but right now it provides a beautiful example of how human structures and natural growth can collaborate. There's no door visible on the side facing the path, and you suspect that the entrance is around the back or on the side away from where you're walking. Not that you have any desire to go inside. You're thoroughly enjoying being out in the rain, being part of this wet, green world rather than seeking shelter from it. The shed serves as a focal point in this part of the garden, a reminder of the practical aspects of gardening, while also contributing to the overall aesthetic through its weathered beauty and integration with the surrounding plantings. The area around the shed has a different feel from the wilder sections of the garden you've been walking through. Here, there are signs of more deliberate cultivation, raised beds that still hold their shape, though they're planted with a mix of what was probably intended and what is certainly self-seeded. You can see the tall stalks of what might be sunflowers, their heavy heads now turned downward, heavy with seeds and rain. Among them, cosmos have seeded themselves freely, their delicate pink and white flowers still blooming despite the season, seemingly unbothered by the moisture. These raised beds tell the story of someone's gardening ambitions, perhaps from years past when the garden was more actively maintained. The beds are constructed from what appears to be naturally weathered wood, now gray and soft-edged, partially obscured by the plants that have grown up around and over them. They create gentle elevation changes that add interest to the landscape, while also providing better drainage for plants that prefer drier conditions. The sunflowers are particularly striking in their current state. What were probably magnificent golden faces following the sun throughout the summer have now become architectural elements, their thick stalks providing vertical structure and their seed heads offering food for birds. The rain has darkened their stems and emphasized their sculptural qualities, making them look like natural monuments to the growing season just past. The cosmos dancing among the sunflowers add a touch of delicate beauty to the scene. These flowers seem almost impossibly delicate for such wet conditions, their tissue paper petals and feathery foliage looking as though they should be damaged by the rain. Instead, they appear to thrive in the moisture, their colors intensified and their movements made more graceful by the weight of water on their stems. You can see evidence of other crops or intentional plantings among the volunteer growth, perhaps the remains of tomato plants, their cages still standing but now supporting morning glories or other climbing vines that have found them convenient. There are what might be pepper plants, their small fruits still hanging despite the season, and herbs that have grown into substantial shrubs under the benevolent neglect of recent years. The rain has intensified slightly, though it's still far from heavy. The drops are larger now, and you can feel them landing on your shoulders and the back of your hands with more distinct impact. Your clothes are thoroughly damp now, but in a way that feels comfortable, like you're being embraced by the weather rather than assaulted by it. The fabric of your jacket has reached that perfect state of dampness where it's no longer trying to repel water, but instead seems to be working with it, channeling it in gentle streams that follow the seams and contours of the garment. This acceptance of the rain, this movement from resistance to collaboration, feels like a metaphor for how to approach life's challenges. Instead of fighting against conditions you can't control, there's wisdom in learning to work with them, to find comfort and even beauty in circumstances that might initially seem uncomfortable or unwelcome. The rain has become not just something you're experiencing, but something you're participating in, part of the larger dance of water and earth and growing things. The temperature remains perfect. The rain is neither cold enough to make you shiver nor warm enough to feel oppressive. It's the temperature of comfort, of belonging, as if the sky has adjusted its offerings to exactly match what your body needs. Your face, where it's most exposed to the rain, feels alive and refreshed, as if each drop is providing some essential nourishment that you didn't know you were missing. You notice that there's what appears to be another path leading away from this area, this one narrower than the main path you've been following, and it seems to head toward a section of the garden that looks even wilder, more overgrown. Tall grasses and what might be naturalized wildflowers create a meadow-like area that stretches away until it's lost in the gentle mist that the rain has created. This path beckons with the promise of different discoveries, of areas that might be even less touched by human intervention. The grasses growing along its edges are taller and more varied than those you've seen in the more cultivated areas, and they move in the gentle breeze like waves on a green sea. The rain has made their seed heads heavy, creating graceful arcs and curves that add to the sense of movement and life. But for now, you're content to continue on your current path, which curves away from the shed and back into a more enclosed section of the garden. Here, the canopy is thicker again, and the rain reaches you in a more filtered way that you can still hear it clearly as it works its way through the layers of leaves above. The change from the more open area around the shed to this enclosed section creates another transition in mood, from the broader perspective of the cultivated beds to the more intimate feeling of walking through a green tunnel. The path beneath your feet has changed character again, becoming softer, more like a woodland trail than a garden path. Fallen leaves have collected here, creating a carpet that's soft and slightly springy underfoot. Your steps make almost no sound now, absorbed by this natural padding, and the effect is to make everything feel even more quiet and contemplative. This leaf carpet is a work of art in itself, composed of contributions from all the trees and shrubs that overhang this section of the path. You can identify leaves from maples, oaks, and what might be cherry trees, all in various stages of decomposition. Some are still relatively fresh, their colors bright and their shapes distinct. Others have begun to break down, their edges softened, and their colors muted to beautiful shades of brown and gold. The rain is accelerating the decomposition process, helping to break down the cellular structure of the leaves and begin their transformation into the rich humus that will feed next year's growth. You can smell this process happening. The sweet, earthy scent of organic matter returning to the soil, the complex aroma of decomposition that's not unpleasant but rather deeply satisfying in its suggestion of renewal and continuity. To either side of the path, ferns grow in abundance, their fronds still green despite the season, though some are beginning to show the golden edges that speak of approaching dormancy. The rain collects on these fronds and then slides down in tiny waterfalls, creating movement and sound that adds to the complex audio landscape of this rain-soaked garden. These ferns create their own microclimate, one that's even more humid and lush than the already moist conditions. They seem to glow with health and vitality, their green more intense than seems possible in the muted light of this overcast day. Some are massive specimens, their fronds arching overhead to create natural umbrellas, while others are smaller and more delicate, tucked into crevices and corners where they add detail and texture to the overall composition. The variety of ferns here is impressive. You can see what might be Christmas ferns, with their distinctive evergreen fronds, and others that could be lady ferns or royal ferns, each with their own growth patterns and textures. The rain has brought out the subtle differences between them, making each species distinct while also showing how they work together to create a cohesive understory planting. You can smell the earthiness more strongly here, the rich scent of decomposing leaves and the mycorrhizal networks that connect the roots of plants in ways invisible to casual observation. There's something primal about this smell, something that connects you to the fundamental processes of growth and decay and renewal that drive all life. It's the smell of the forest floor, of soil that's alive with microorganisms and fungi and all the invisible workers that keep ecosystems functioning. This earthy aroma is intensified by the rain, which has awakened and released aromatic compounds that might otherwise remain locked in the soil and plant matter. It's a complex bouquet that changes as you walk, sometimes more mushroomy, sometimes more herbal, occasionally with hints of flowers or fruits that have fallen and begun to decompose among the leaves. A slight rise in the path brings you to a vantage point where you can look back over the section of garden you just walked through. From here, the shed looks like a fairy tale cottage, nestled among its climbing plants and surrounded by the organized chaos of the naturalized beds. The pond is visible as a dark mirror reflecting the pewter sky, and beyond that, you can see the clearing where you walked earlier, though it looks different from this elevated perspective, more intimate, more secret. This elevated viewpoint provides a different understanding of the garden's layout and design. From here, You can see how the various elements work together to create a cohesive whole, how the paths connect different areas while also providing views and vistas that reward the observant visitor. The rain has created a unifying atmosphere that ties everything together, making the entire scene look like a painting by one of the great landscape artists. The view also reveals details that weren't apparent from ground level, the way water collects in certain areas, creating temporary wetlands that will support different plants and wildlife. You can see the subtle grading that directs water flow, the way larger trees provide canopy and structure for smaller plants, the careful balance between cultivated and wild areas that makes this garden feel both designed and natural. The rain continues its steady presence, and you realize that you've lost all sense of how long you've been walking. Time has taken on a different quality here, measured not by clocks, but by the rhythm of your footsteps, the patterns of rain on leaves, the subtle changes in light as the afternoon progresses. It's a more organic sense of time, one that feels more natural and less urgent than the schedule-driven time of daily life. This shift in temporal awareness is one of the gifts that gardens offer, the opportunity to step out of the relentless pace of modern life and into a more natural rhythm. Here, time moves at the speed of growing things, of weather patterns, of seasonal changes. It's a reminder that there are other ways to experience time, other rhythms that might be more in tune with our deeper human needs. The path begins to descend slightly, leading you into what appears to be a more sheltered section of the garden. Here, larger trees create a more definite canopy, and the rain reaches you in larger, more intermittent drops that have collected on the leaves above before making their way down to where you walk. The sound is different here too, more varied, as the drops fall from different heights and land on different surfaces. This cathedral-like space feels sacred somehow, with the tall trees creating natural columns and the interwoven branches forming a living roof overhead. The rain that penetrates this canopy has a different quality. It's been filtered and slowed by its passage through the leaves, arriving in larger, more deliberate drops that seem to have been chosen for their perfect timing and placement. The light in this section is different too, filtered through multiple layers of leaves until it takes on a green tinge that makes everything look as though it's underwater. This quality of light is magical, transforming ordinary garden plants into something more mysterious and exotic. The rain adds to this effect, creating a sense of being in a living, breathing space that exists outside normal time and weather. You can see that this section of the garden has a different character, more woodland-like, with native plants that seem to have claimed the space and made it their own. Trilliums have finished their bloom long ago, but their three-part leaves are still visible among the ferns and the wild ginger. Moss covers fallen logs and spreads across the surface of rocks, creating a soft, green carpet that looks inviting even in the rain. These native plants have an authenticity that's different from the more obviously cultivated areas of the garden. They belong here in a way that speaks of deep time and natural selection, of plants that have evolved to thrive in exactly these conditions of soil and moisture and light. The rain seems to awaken something in them, making them appear more vibrant and alive than they might in drier conditions. The moss deserves particular attention, as it's clearly thriving in these conditions. It covers surfaces and shades that range from bright emerald to deep forest green, creating natural upholstery that softens the hard edges of rocks and logs. The rain has made the moss particularly lustrous, and you can see how it's drinking in the moisture, expanding slightly as it absorbs what it needs for growth and reproduction. A small stream appears beside the path, though it's more of a seasonal watercourse that's been awakened by the rain. The water moves slowly, barely more than a trickle, but it adds another layer to the symphony of water sounds that surrounds you. It gurgles softly as it encounters small obstacles, and you can see how it's carved a gentle channel for itself among the roots and rocks. This stream is clearly ephemeral, present only when there's enough rain to create surface runoff from the surrounding area. But its presence adds a dynamic element to this woodland section, a reminder that water is always moving through the landscape, sometimes visible and sometimes not. The rain you're experiencing is part of this larger hydrological cycle, and this small stream is evidence of how that cycle plays out in the garden's microclimate. The water in the stream is clear and clean, carrying small pieces of organic matter, leaves, twigs, seeds that will be deposited downstream to create new growing conditions for plants. You can see how the stream has carved its channel over time, creating small pools and riffles that add visual interest and provide different habitats for aquatic life. You follow the path as it parallels this small stream, enjoying the way the water catches what little light penetrates the canopy and reflects it back in subtle glimmers. The stream is so small that you could easily step across it, but there's something appealing about walking alongside it, about being accompanied by its quiet music as you continue your ramble through this rain-soaked garden world. The sound of the stream adds another layer to the complex audio environment of this section. It's a more active sound than the gentle patter of rain on leaves, providing a gentle background rhythm that complements the other water sounds. The combination creates a natural soundtrack that's both stimulating and soothing, engaging your attention while also promoting relaxation and contemplation. The vegetation here is lush and varied, with plants growing at every level from ground-hugging mosses to the canopy of trees overhead. You can see how the moisture has brought out the colors in everything. The mosses are impossibly green, the bark of trees is rich and dark, and even the fallen leaves seem more vibrant, their yellows and reds and browns intensified by the rain. This layered ecosystem is a perfect example of how natural communities organize themselves, with different plants occupying different niches and taking advantage of different resources. The canopy trees provide structure and create the light conditions that allow the understory plants to thrive. The ferns and mosses take advantage of the humid conditions created by the overhead canopy, while the stream provides water and nutrients that support still other communities of plants. Your footsteps are nearly silent on the soft earth of this woodland path, and you find yourself moving even more slowly, not wanting to disturb the sense of peace that seems to emanate from this sheltered space. The rain above the canopy sounds different than it did in more open areas, more like a gentle rustling, as if the trees themselves are whispering to each other about the gift of this moisture. This whispering quality of the rain in the trees creates an atmosphere of intimacy and secrecy, as if you're being allowed to overhear a conversation between the garden and the sky. The trees seem to be actively participating in the rain, their leaves positioned to catch and channel the water, their branches arranged to create the most beneficial growing conditions for the plants below. The path curves away from the stream, leading you toward what appears to be another, more open area ahead. But the transition is gradual, with the woodland gradually thinning rather than ending abruptly. First, you notice that there's more light filtering through the canopy, then that the understory plants are different, less fern and moss, more of the shrubs and perennials you saw in earlier sections of the garden. This gradual transition is more satisfying than an abrupt change would be, allowing you to appreciate the subtle differences between different garden areas while maintaining a sense of continuity. The rain continues to unify everything, creating consistent conditions that make each area feel like part of a larger whole while still maintaining its individual character. As you emerge from the woodland area, you find yourself in what was probably once a more formal section of the garden, though it too has softened and naturalized over time. You can see the remnants of what might have been geometric beds, though their edges are now blurred by the plants that have grown beyond their original boundaries and by the new plants that have seeded themselves in the spaces between. This transition from the wild woodland to the more formal area creates another shift in mood and perspective. The formal elements, even in their current softened state, speak of human intention and design, while the woodland felt more like a natural ecosystem that had been allowed to develop according to its own logic. Both approaches have their beauty, and the garden is richer for including both. Here, the rain seems more present again, falling more directly on you now that you're out from under the tree canopy. You readjust your hood and settle back into the rhythm of walking in open rain, feeling the drops land on your shoulders and the back of your hands. The gravel path has returned, though it's softer here, mixed with more organic matter that makes your footsteps quieter than they were in some earlier sections. The return to gravel creates a different sound profile under your feet, and you realize how much you've been unconsciously using these audio cues to orient yourself in the garden. Each surface, gravel, packed earth, leaf litter, moss, creates its own characteristic sound when you walk on it, and these sounds help create the distinctive atmosphere of each garden area. To your left, what was probably once a herb garden has become a beautiful tangle of plants, both intentional and volunteer. You can still make out the structure of raised beds, but they're filled with a mixture of what might be original plantings and what has certainly self-seeded. The tall, architectural forms of fennel wave in the gentle breeze, their feathery foliage dark with moisture, and you can catch the faint licorice scent even in the rain. The fennel is particularly striking in these conditions, its fine-textured foliage creating intricate patterns against the gray sky. The rain has made it darker and more substantial looking, emphasizing its architectural qualities. You can see how water collects on the feathery fronds and then drops in tiny cascades, creating constant movement and sound that adds to the dynamic quality of this section. The licorice scent of the fennel is intensified by the rain, released each time the water disturbs the foliage. It's a complex aroma that changes as you walk past, sometimes more sweet, sometimes more herbal, occasionally with hints of anise or other aromatic compounds. The rain seems to unlock these fragrances and carry them more effectively, creating a natural aromatherapy experience as you move through the garden. Lavender grows throughout this area, some plants clearly established and mature, others smaller and probably self-seeded. The rain has intensified their scent, and as you walk past, you're enveloped in that distinctive aroma that's both soothing and invigorating. Some of the lavender still holds flowers, though they're faded now, and the rain has weighted down the stems so that they create graceful arcs rather than standing upright. The combination of lavender and fennel creates a complex olfactory landscape that changes with each step. Sometimes one scent dominates, sometimes they blend into something entirely new. The rain acts as a conductor, orchestrating these fragrances into a symphony of scent that enhances the visual and auditory experience of walking through this section. Other herbs have naturalized throughout this area, creating a living pharmacy of aromatic plants. You can identify what might be rosemary, its needle-like leaves dark and glossy with rain, and perhaps some sage, its gray-green foliage providing color contrast among the other plantings. Even in their rain-soaked state, these herbs maintain their distinctive characteristics, their leaves designed to hold essential oils that aren't easily washed away. The path splits here, offering you a choice between continuing straight ahead or taking a branch that curves to the right and seems to lead toward yet another section of the garden. Both options look equally appealing, equally mysterious in the way they disappear around curves and behind plantings. You choose the right-hand path, drawn by something you can't quite identify, perhaps just the appeal of exploring something new, or maybe the way the light seems to fall differently in that direction. This choice point adds to the sense of adventure and discovery that makes garden exploration so rewarding. Each path represents different possibilities, different discoveries, different perspectives on the same landscape. The garden reveals itself gradually, requiring choices and decisions that shape the experience and make each visit unique. You choose the right-hand path, drawn by something you can't quite identify, perhaps just the appeal of exploring something new, or maybe the way the light, seems to fall differently in that direction. This path is narrower than the main one you've been following, and it feels more intimate, more secret. The plantings on either side grow closer to the path, sometimes brushing against you as you walk, leaving traces of moisture on your clothes and occasionally releasing bursts of scent as you disturb the rain-laden foliage. This narrower path creates a more immersive experience, making you feel more connected to the plants and more aware of their individual characteristics. Each brush against a wet leaf or stem is a small interaction, a moment of contact that adds to the sensory richness of the walk. The rain has made everything more tactile, more present, more immediate. You're walking through what might be called a cottage garden section, where plants grow in abundance and apparent randomness, though you suspect there's more design here than first appears. Roses climb over and through other shrubs, creating layers of texture and color. Even though the peak blooming season is past, there's still beauty in the hips and the way the canes arch and interweave with other plants. This cottage garden style represents a different approach to garden design, one that emphasizes abundance and naturalistic planning over formal structure. The rain has enhanced this abundance, making everything appear more lush and generous. The colors are more saturated, the textures more pronounced, and the overall effect is of a garden that's overflowing with life and growth. Clematis has climbed up and over everything it can reach, and though its flowers are finished, the seed heads are beautiful in their own right, fluffy, silvery clusters that catch the rain and sparkle with moisture. The vine has created living sculptures as it's grown over and around other plants, and you can see how rain has collected in the natural cups and hollows formed by this intertwining of different plants. These clematis seed heads are like natural ornaments, each cluster a perfect example of how plants can be beautiful in all seasons, not just when they're in bloom. The rain has given them an extra sparkle, and they catch what little light is available and reflect it back in subtle ways. They move gently in the breeze, creating constant small movements that add life and dynamism to the scene. The path curves more sharply here, and you find yourself walking in what feels almost like a tunnel of vegetation. Shrubs and perennials have grown up and over the path, creating a living archway that filters the rain and creates an intimate, enclosed feeling. The sound of rain is muffled here, but you can hear it clearly on the leaves just above your head, and occasionally a larger drop that has collected on the vegetation falls onto your hood or shoulder. This tunnel effect is magical, creating a sense of walking through a secret passage in a fairy tale. The rain that penetrates this living canopy has been filtered and slowed, arriving in larger, more deliberate drops that seem to have been specially selected for their perfect timing. The enclosed space concentrates the scents of the wet plants, creating an almost intoxicating atmosphere of floral and herbal fragrances. This enclosed section doesn't last long, and soon you emerge into another open area, this one smaller and more enclosed than the clearing you visited earlier. It has the feeling of a secret garden room, with the sense that you've discovered something special and hidden. The path makes a small loop around this space, and in the center, there's what appears to be the remains of a small fountain or bird bath, though it's clearly not functional and hasn't been for some time. This garden room feels like a private retreat, a place designed for contemplation and quiet observation. The enclosure created by the surrounding plantings gives it an intimate scale that's perfect for solitary reflection. The rain adds to this atmosphere, creating a sense of being sheltered and protected while still being fully connected to the natural world. Like the fountain you saw earlier, this one is filled with rainwater and collected fallen leaves. But this one has also become home to what looks like a small ecosystem. You can see water striders skating across the surface, and the shallow water is probably home to other small creatures as well. Plants have grown up around its base, softening its edges and integrating it into the natural landscape. This transformation of a formal garden feature into a habitat for wildlife is a beautiful example of how gardens can evolve and improve over time when they're allowed to follow natural processes. The fountain is probably more valuable to the garden's ecosystem now than it was when it was functioning as intended. It provides water for birds and insects, breeding habitat for aquatic creatures, and a focal point for the human visitors who discover it. You walk slowly around this small space, taking in the details. The rain continues its gentle patter, and you notice how it creates different sounds as it falls on the various plants and surfaces around you. There's the soft drumming on the broad leaves of what might be a small magnolia, the sharper patter on the gravel path, and the almost musical notes it creates when it hits the metal rim of the old fountain. This small garden room is a study in how different textures and materials interact with rain. Each surface responds differently to the water, creating its own characteristic sound and visual effect. The broad leaves shed water in different ways than the narrow leaves. The stone absorbs water differently than the metal, and the gravel creates different patterns of runoff in the soil. The plantings here are varied and seem to reflect different seasons of planting and self-seeding. Early spring bulbs have long since finished their display, but you can see their foliage among the other plants, still gathering energy for next year's show. Perennials that probably peaked in summer are now showing their autumn faces, some still holding interesting seed heads, others beginning the process of dying back to their roots. This seasonal progression visible in the plants is a reminder of the garden's annual cycle, of the way it changes and renews itself throughout the year. The rain is part of this cycle, providing the moisture needed for decomposition and soil building that will support next year's growth. Even in this season of apparent dormancy, essential processes are continuing. There's something deeply peaceful about this small, enclosed space. It feels like a natural stopping point, a place for reflection and quiet observation. You don't sit. The rain would make that uncomfortable, and besides, you're enjoying the gentle movement of walking. But you do slow your pace even further, taking time to really observe the details around you. This slowing down, this deliberate attention to detail, is one of the gifts that gardens offer. In our fast-paced world, we rarely take time to really observe the small things, the way water beads on leaves, the subtle variations in green that occur even within a single plant, the complex relationships between different species that share the same space. The rain seems to slow everything down, making this kind of detailed observation not just possible but irresistible. A small bird lands on the edge of the old fountain, takes a drink from the collected rainwater, and then flies away. Its brief presence adds to the sense of life and activity that continues regardless of the weather, regardless of human presence. You're just another visitor here, another temporary inhabitant of this space that exists primarily for the plants and creatures that call it home. The bird's appearance is a reminder that this garden is not just a human creation, but a living ecosystem that supports a wide variety of life. The rain that you're experiencing as an aesthetic pleasure is providing essential resources for countless creatures, from the obvious ones like birds to the invisible ones like soil microorganisms. Your walk through this rain-soaked landscape is just one small part of a much larger web of activity and relationship. The path leads out of this small garden room through what appears to be a gap in the plantings, though it might have once been a more formal opening. As you walk through, branches heavy with rain brush against you, and you catch the scent of wet roses and something else, something green and fresh that might be the smell of rain-washed leaves. This transition from the enclosed garden room back to the broader landscape creates another shift in perspective. The intimate scale of the garden room gives way to longer views and wider skies, but the rain continues to provide continuity and unity. Each area of the garden has its own character, but the rain creates a consistent atmosphere that ties everything together. You're back on a wider path now, though still not as wide as the main path you started on. This one has a different character, more utilitarian, perhaps, as if it was designed for access rather than for leisurely strolling. But it's no less beautiful for that, and the rain continues to transform everything it touches, making even the most ordinary elements of the garden seem magical and mysterious. The path's more utilitarian character is evident in its directness and the way it's constructed, perhaps with more attention to drainage and durability than to creating particular aesthetic effects. But the rain has democratized the garden's beauty, making every surface and every plant equally worthy of attention and admiration. To your right, you can see what appears to be a vegetable garden area, though it's clearly been allowed to go somewhat wild. Tall stalks that might be the remains of corn or sunflowers create vertical elements, and you can see the spreading forms of what are probably squash or pumpkin plants, their large leaves dark and glossy with rain. Even in their end-of-season state, these plants have a sculptural quality that's enhanced by the moisture that clings to every surface. This kitchen garden area has its own beauty, different from the more ornamental sections but equally compelling. The plants here were chosen for their utility rather than their beauty, but the rain has revealed the aesthetic qualities that exist in all growing things. The large leaves of the squash plants create bold shapes and patterns, while the vertical stalks of the corn or sunflowers provide structural elements that any garden designer would envy. Some of the vegetables are still producing. You can see what might be late tomatoes, their fruits red and heavy with rain, and perhaps some peppers that are still hanging on despite the season. There's something satisfying about seeing food plants thriving in these conditions, a reminder of the fundamental connection between weather and the sustenance that all life depends upon. The rain seems to be settling into a steady rhythm now, neither increasing nor decreasing, just maintaining its gentle, persistent presence. You've completely adjusted to it, and it no longer feels like weather that you're experiencing, but rather like a natural element of this garden world, as integral to the experience as the plants and paths themselves. This complete acceptance of the rain, this integration with its rhythm and presence, represents a fundamental shift in how you're relating to the natural world. Instead of seeing yourself as separate from nature, as someone who observes it from the outside, you've become part of the garden's ecosystem, another element in the complex web of relationships that makes this place alive and dynamic. Your clothes are thoroughly damp now, but not uncomfortably so. The moisture seems to have reached an equilibrium, and you feel pleasantly cocooned in this slightly humid microclimate that the rain has created around your body. There's something nurturing about this feeling, as if the rain is taking care of you in the same way it's taking care of all the plants around you. This sense of being cared for by the rain, of being included in its nurturing embrace, creates a feeling of belonging and connection that's rare in modern life. It's a reminder that we are part of nature, not separate from it, and that the same forces that sustain the plants and animals around us are also sustaining us. The path begins to curve more dramatically, and you can sense that you might be approaching another transition in the character of the garden. Sure enough, as you round the curve, you can see that the plantings are changing, becoming more naturalistic, more like what you might find at the edge of a woodland or meadow. This transition to more naturalistic plantings creates a different mood and atmosphere. The plants here seem more wild, more connected to the larger landscape beyond the garden's boundaries. The rain seems more at home here too, if that's possible, as if this is the kind of environment where rain naturally belongs, where it's doing its essential work of supporting native ecosystems and natural processes. Native grasses grow in clumps and drifts, their seed heads heavy with moisture and bending gracefully under the weight of collected raindrops. Among them, you can see the dried stalks of wildflowers that bloomed earlier in the season, black-eyed Susans, perhaps, and what might be the remains of goldenrod, their summer glory now transformed into the more subtle beauty of autumn seed heads and skeletal stems. These native plants have an authenticity and rightness that's different from the more cultivated areas of the garden. They belong here not just aesthetically but ecologically, having evolved to thrive in exactly these conditions of soil and climate and rainfall. The rain awakens something in them, making them seem more alive and vital than they might in drier conditions. The grasses are particularly beautiful in the rain, their different textures and colors enhanced by the moisture. Some have fine, hair-like seed heads that catch water droplets like jewels, while others have more substantial, architectural forms that create bold silhouettes against the gray sky. The rain has made them all more visible, more present, more worthy of attention and admiration. This area has a different feel from the more cultivated sections of the garden you've been walking through. It feels wilder, more connected to the larger landscape beyond the garden's boundaries. The rain seems more at home here too, if that's possible, as if this is the kind of environment where rain naturally belongs, where it's doing its essential work of supporting native ecosystems and natural processes. The wildness of this area doesn't mean it's chaotic or unmanaged. There's evidence of thoughtful design in the way the plants are grouped and the way the path moves through the space. But the design philosophy here is different, more about working with natural processes than imposing human will upon the landscape. You can hear different birds here, though you can't see them through the rain and the vegetation. Their calls seem more varied, more wild than the gentle robin you encountered earlier. There's a cardinal's clear whistle and what might be the more complex song of a wood thrush, though it's hard to be sure with the rain creating its own audio backdrop. The presence of different birds suggests that this more naturalistic area provides different kinds of habitat than the more cultivated sections. The native plants probably offer food sources and nesting sites that the ornamental plants don't, creating a more complex and supportive ecosystem for wildlife. The path through this naturalistic area is less defined than in other sections, more like a mowed strip through a meadow than a formal garden path. Your feet sink slightly into the softer ground, and you can feel how the rain has made the earth more yielding, more alive. Each step releases a subtle scent of wet earth and decomposing organic matter, the smell of soil that's actively engaged in the processes of growth and renewal. This softer ground creates a different walking experience, one that's more connected to the earth itself. You can feel the give and resilience of living soil, the way it responds to your weight and then springs back. The rain has awakened all the biological processes that make soil alive, the work of earthworms and microorganisms, the slow dance of roots and fungi, the complex chemistry of decomposition and nutrient cycling. The scent rising from this rain-soaked earth is complex and ever-changing. Sometimes it's more mushroomy, speaking of the fungal networks that connect plant roots in invisible webs of mutual support. Other times it's more herbal, as aromatic compounds are released from decomposing plant matter. Occasionally there are hints of sweetness, perhaps from fallen fruits or flowers that are returning their sugars to the soil. You notice that this section of the garden is home to plants you haven't seen in the more cultivated areas. There are native shrubs that you don't immediately recognize, their leaves and bark darkened by the rain until they seem to absorb light rather than reflect it. Some still hold berries, deep purple clusters that probably provide important food for birds, and bright red berries on shrubs that might be native viburnums or elderberries. These berry-bearing plants are like natural bird feeders, their fruits ripening at exactly the time when birds need high-energy food to fuel their migration or to build up reserves for winter. The rain has made the berries particularly glossy and appealing, and you can imagine how welcome they must be to the creatures that depend on them. The integration of food-producing plants into the garden's design speaks to a more holistic approach to gardening, one that considers the needs of wildlife as well as human aesthetic preferences. These native shrubs might not have the showy flowers of hybrid ornamentals, but they provide ecosystem services that make the garden more sustainable and more supportive of local wildlife. The rain continues its steady work, and you're struck by how different everything looks in this weather. Colors are more saturated, textures are more pronounced, and there's a sense of abundance and fertility that might not be as obvious on a dry, sunny day. The garden reveals different aspects of its beauty depending on the weather, and you feel privileged to be seeing this rain-washed version. This thought makes you realize how much weather influences our perception of landscapes. The same garden that might look dormant and brown on a hot, dry day is revealed by rain to be full of subtle colors and textures. Rain doesn't just water the plants, it transforms the entire visual and sensory experience of being in the garden. The rain also seems to awaken sounds that might not be audible in drier conditions. You can hear the gentle dripping from leaves, the soft gurgling of water moving through small channels, the subtle rustling of plants as they respond to the weight of collected moisture. These are the sounds of life processes, of the garden actively engaged in the work of growth and renewal. As you continue walking through this wilder section, you notice that the path is beginning to curve back toward what you sense might be the more cultivated areas of the garden. The transition is gradual. First, you notice that some of the plants look more intentionally placed, then that the path itself becomes more defined, with clearer edges and what might be deliberate plantings rather than natural growth. But before you leave this naturalistic area completely, you come upon something unexpected, a small wooden bridge that crosses what appears to be a seasonal stream or perhaps a drainage area that's been enhanced to handle the garden's runoff. The bridge is simple and weathered, just a few planks with low railings on either side, but it feels significant in this landscape, like a threshold between different worlds. The bridge represents a perfect marriage of function and beauty, solving a practical problem while also creating a moment of pause and transition in the garden experience. It's weathered wood has taken on the gray patina that comes from years of exposure to weather, and moss has begun to colonize some of its surfaces, helping it blend into the natural landscape. You step onto the bridge and pause, looking down at the water that flows beneath it. The stream is running more fully because of the rain, carrying fallen leaves and small twigs in its gentle current. The water is dark and clear, and you can see how it's carved a natural channel through the landscape, creating its own habitat for the plants and creatures that thrive in wet conditions. The stream's banks are lined with plants that clearly love having their feet in water, sedges and rushes that create vertical accents, and lower plants that spread horizontally to form living carpets along the water's edge. These plants are thriving in the current conditions, their colors intensified by the rain and their forms made more graceful by the weight of collected moisture. Standing on this bridge, you can see both upstream and downstream, getting a sense of the water's journey through the garden. Upstream, the channel disappears into the naturalistic plantings you've been walking through, suggesting that it collects runoff from a larger area. Downstream, it flows toward what appears to be a constructed wetland or rain garden, where the water will be slowed and filtered before continuing its journey. The sound of running water adds another layer to the audio landscape of the rain. It's a more active sound than the gentle patter of rain on leaves, a reminder that this precipitation is part of larger cycles of water movement through the landscape. You can see where the stream disappears into a culvert under what must be the main path of the garden, and you wonder where it goes from there, perhaps to join a larger waterway, or maybe to be absorbed into the soil of a constructed wetland. This small stream is a perfect example of how good garden design can work with natural processes rather than against them. Instead of simply channeling runoff away as quickly as possible, the garden has created opportunities for the water to slow down, to be absorbed and filtered, to provide habitat and beauty along its journey. Standing on this bridge, surrounded by the sound of rain and running water, you feel a deep sense of connection to the natural processes that sustain all life. There's something humbling about being present for this simple but essential event: rain falling, water moving, plants receiving the moisture they need to continue their slow work of growing and photosynthesis and root development. The rain continues to fall gently, each drop part of the vast circulation system that moves water from ocean to sky to land and back again. Your presence here is just a brief moment in this eternal cycle, but it's a moment of connection and understanding that will stay with you long after the rain has stopped and you've returned to indoor spaces. You continue across the bridge and find yourself back on a more defined path, though this one has its own character. It's wider than the narrow track through the naturalistic area, but not as formal as some of the other paths you've walked. It seems to be a transitional space, connecting the wilder areas of the garden with the more cultivated sections. This transitional quality is evident in the plantings as well, which seem to bridge the gap between wild and cultivated. There are clearly intentional garden plants mixed with natives, creating combinations that feel both designed and natural. The rain has unified these different elements, making them appear to belong together regardless of their origins. The plantings here reflect this transitional character. There are clearly intentional garden plants mixed with natives, creating combinations that feel both designed and natural. Ornamental grasses planted in drifts create texture and movement, their seed heads catching the rain and creating patterns of light and shadow as they sway in the gentle breeze. These ornamental grasses are particularly beautiful in the current conditions. The rain has weighted down their seed heads, creating graceful arcs that add movement and life to the composition. Different varieties have different characteristics, some with fine, feathery plumes, others with more substantial, architectural forms. The rain has brought out the subtle color variations in their foliage and seed heads, creating a tapestry of muted golds and greens and purples. Among the grasses, perennials that were probably spectacular in their peak season now show their autumn faces. You can see the architectural seed heads of echinacea, the delicate branching patterns of astilbe that has finished blooming, and the still interesting foliage of hostas that are beginning to show the yellow edges that signal their preparation for dormancy. These perennials in their autumn state have a different kind of beauty than they possessed in their flowering prime. The rain has emphasized their structural qualities, their bones and architecture that will carry them through the winter months. There's something honest and dignified about plants in this state, showing their essential character without the distraction of showy flowers. The rain has brought out the sculptural qualities of all these plants, emphasizing their forms and textures in ways that might not be as obvious in other weather. Water clings to the fuzzy seed heads and creates perfect beads on the waxy surfaces of some leaves, turning the entire garden into a display of natural jewelry. This enhancement of texture and form by the rain is one of its most magical qualities. Surfaces that might appear ordinary in dry conditions are transformed into something extraordinary by the presence of water. The rain doesn't just provide moisture. It reveals hidden beauty and creates new aesthetic experiences. As you walk, you become aware that the light is beginning to change, though it's subtle in these overcast conditions. The afternoon is progressing, and while there's no dramatic shift from light to shadow, there's a sense that the day is moving toward its quieter hours. The rain continues unchanged, and you realize that you could happily continue walking in it for hours more. This sense of the day's progression adds another layer to the experience, a reminder that you're part of larger rhythms and cycles that extend far beyond this garden. The rain connects you not just to the immediate landscape, but to weather patterns that span continents, to seasonal cycles that govern life across the hemisphere. The path curves to the left here, and you can see that it's leading you back toward areas that look more familiar, though they appear different from this new perspective. You think you can make out the shed you passed earlier, though it's partly hidden by the intervening vegetation and the gentle haze that the rain has created. But there's still more garden to explore before you complete your circuit. The path leads you into what appears to be another distinct section of the garden, this one with yet another personality entirely. Here, the focus seems to be on foliage rather than flowers, plants chosen for the beauty of their leaves rather than their blooms. This emphasis on foliage creates a different kind of garden experience, one that's less about seasonal displays and more about sustained beauty throughout the growing season. The rain has made these foliage plants particularly stunning, intensifying their colors and emphasizing their textures in ways that make them worthy of sustained attention. Hostas grow in abundance here, their broad leaves creating a tapestry of different greens, from the blue-green of some varieties to the chartreuse of others. The rain has turned these leaves into perfect collectors, each one cupping water that occasionally overflows in small cascades when the leaf can't hold anymore. You can see how the water follows the natural channels created by the leaf veins, creating temporary streams that flow from the center of each leaf to its edges. These hostas are magnificent specimens, clearly well established and growing in conditions that favor their development. Some have leaves the size of dinner plates, creating bold architectural statements in the garden. Others are smaller and more delicate, their leaves variegated with patterns of green and white or green and yellow that create complex visual textures. The variety of hostas here is impressive, suggesting that someone has collected them over many years, choosing varieties for their different characteristics and growing requirements. The rain has revealed the subtle differences between them. Some have glossy leaves that shed water quickly, while others have more textured surfaces that hold water droplets longer. Japanese painted ferns add their silvery presence to this composition, their delicate fronds creating texture and movement that contrasts beautifully with the broader, more solid forms of the hostas. The rain has made their colors more vivid. The silver seems to glow, and the purple and green markings on their fronds appear more pronounced. These ferns are like living watercolors, their colors shifting and blending in the rain until they seem almost translucent. The rain has made them particularly lustrous, and they catch and reflect what little light is available in subtle and beautiful ways. Their delicate fronds move gently in the slight breeze, creating constant small movements that add life to the composition. Heucheras contribute their own color notes to this foliage symphony. Deep burgundy leaves that are almost black in the rain, and others in shades of lime green and coral that seem to generate their own light in the muted conditions. These plants create ground cover that flows around the larger hostas like colorful rivers, connecting different areas of the planting and creating visual harmony. The heucheras are particularly striking in the rain, their colors intensified until they seem almost artificial in their vibrancy. The rain has brought out qualities in their leaves that might not be visible in drier conditions, subtle color variations, textural differences, the way they hold and shed water according to their individual characteristics. The path through this area is softer underfoot, covered with what appears to be shredded bark mulch that's been darkened by the rain and releases a pleasant, woody scent with each step. The sound of your footsteps is almost completely muffled here, creating an even greater sense of quiet and contemplation. This mulched path creates a completely different walking experience from the gravel paths you've been on. It's softer, more yielding, and it absorbs sound rather than reflecting it. The rain has made the mulch particularly aromatic, releasing the complex sense of decomposing wood and the organic compounds that create the characteristic smell of forest floors. You notice that there are subtle elevation changes in this area, gentle mounds and depressions that create interest and allow for different growing conditions within a relatively small space. Plants that prefer slightly drier conditions are placed on the raised areas, while those that love moisture are in the lower spots where rainwater naturally collects. This thoughtful use of topography to create different microclimates within a small area is a sophisticated design technique that makes the garden more diverse and interesting. The rain reveals these subtle grade changes, showing how water naturally moves through the landscape and collects in the low areas where moisture-loving plants can take advantage of it. In one of these lower areas, you discover a small collection of astilbes, their feathery plumes now dried, but still beautiful, like botanical fireworks frozen in time. The rain has weighted them down slightly, but they maintain their graceful forms, and you can imagine how spectacular they must have been when they were in full bloom earlier in the season. These astilbes represent the garden's summer memory, a reminder of the spectacular displays that occurred months ago when these plants were in their prime. The rain has given them a different kind of beauty, emphasizing their structural qualities and the way their dried plumes catch and hold water droplets like natural ornaments. The rain continues its steady presence, and you're struck by how it reveals the thoughtfulness of the garden's design. Even in sections that appear to have naturalized, you can see evidence of careful plant selection and placement, the way moisture-loving plants are positioned where they'll receive the most water, the way the paths curve to provide different views and experiences, the way taller plants provide backdrop for shorter ones. This evidence of design intelligence, even in a garden that has been allowed to evolve naturally, speaks to the skill of whoever originally planned this space. Good garden design creates a framework that can accommodate change and growth, that becomes more beautiful over time rather than requiring constant maintenance to preserve a particular look. As you round a gentle curve in the path, you come upon another water feature, this one clearly more recent and intentional than the naturalized pond you discovered earlier. It's a small rain garden, designed to capture and slowly infiltrate stormwater runoff. Native sedges and rushes grow in the depression, along with other plants that can handle both wet and dry conditions. This rain garden is a perfect example of contemporary sustainable garden design, solving practical problems while also creating beauty and habitat. Right now, with the rain, this garden is performing its intended function beautifully. Water has collected in the depression, creating temporary pools among the plants, and you can see how the system is designed to slow the water's movement and allow it to soak into the ground rather than running off quickly. The plants in this rain garden are different from those in other areas, more architectural, more focused on texture and form than on color. Tall sedges create vertical elements, their narrow leaves moving gently in the breeze, while lower plants spread horizontally, creating patterns and textures that are enhanced by the rain collecting on their surfaces. These plants have been chosen specifically for their ability to handle fluctuating water levels, thriving when the garden is flooded during heavy rains, but also surviving during dry periods when the depression might be completely dry. It's a sophisticated approach to gardening that works with natural processes rather than against them. You walk around the perimeter of this rain garden, following the path as it curves around the depression. From different angles, you can see how the plantings create different compositions, and you appreciate the way the designers have used the natural topography to create something that's both beautiful and environmentally beneficial. The sound of water moving through this area is subtle but noticeable, not the active gurgling of a stream, but the gentler sound of water being absorbed by soil and plant roots. It's a reminder of the rain's essential function, beyond its aesthetic and sensory pleasures. This is water doing its essential work, supporting life and maintaining the cycles that make all growth possible. Beyond the rain garden, the path leads you into another section that feels more intimate and enclosed. Here, evergreen shrubs create structure and provide year-round interest, their dark green foliage made even richer and more lustrous by the rain. You can smell the resinous scent that some of these plants release when wet, a clean, forest-like aroma that adds another layer to the complex bouquet of rain-washed scents. These evergreen plants have a different relationship with rain than deciduous plants do. Their waxy or needle-like leaves are designed to shed water efficiently, preventing the accumulation of ice that could damage branches in winter. The rain beads up on their surfaces and rolls off in perfect droplets that catch the light and create temporary jewelry before falling to the ground. Rhododendrons grow in this area. They're large, leathery leaves designed to shed water efficiently. You can see how the rain beads up on their surfaces before rolling off, and you notice how the plants seem to glisten with health and vitality in these conditions. Even though their spectacular spring blooms are long past, these plants contribute important structure and texture to the garden's winter appearance. The rhododendrons here are clearly mature specimens, their forms shaped by years of growth into natural sculptures that provide year-round interest. The rain has intensified the deep green of their leaves and emphasized their architectural qualities. You can see how water collects in the natural cups formed where leaves meet branches, creating temporary reservoirs that will slowly release their contents to the plant's roots. The path narrows again as it passes between two large shrubs, creating another tunnel-like effect. This time, you're walking between what appear to be large viburnums, their branches heavy with moisture and occasionally dripping larger drops onto your shoulders and head. The brief passage through this natural archway feels ceremonial, like moving from one garden room to another. These viburnum shrubs create a natural gateway that marks the transition between different areas of the garden. Their branches arch overhead, creating a brief covered passage that concentrates the sense of wet foliage and creates an intimate, enclosed feeling. The rain that penetrates this canopy arrives in larger, more deliberate drops that add to the sense of ceremony and transition. As you emerge from between the shrubs, you find yourself in what is clearly a more formal area of the garden, though one that has been softened by time and naturalization. You can see the bones of what was probably once a very structured design: geometric beds, straight sight lines, perhaps even some topiary that has grown beyond its original shapes. This formal area represents yet another approach to garden design, one based on geometry and human control rather than naturalistic plantings. But what exists now is more interesting than rigid formality would be. The original structure provides a framework that gives the space coherence, while the natural growth and self-seeding that has occurred over time adds layers of complexity and surprise. It's like seeing a formal garden that has been translated into a more relaxed dialect. The grammar is still there, but the vocabulary has expanded and become more flexible. The rain has unified all these elements, making the formal and informal aspects seem like natural partners rather than opposing philosophies. Box hedges that were probably once neatly trimmed now grow in soft, billowing shapes that are more cloud-like than geometric. The rain has darkened their small leaves until they're almost black-green, and you can see how water has collected in the natural depressions where the hedges have grown into their own organic shapes. These boxwood hedges tell the story of the garden's evolution over time. You can still see hints of their original geometric forms, but these have been softened and rounded by years of growth that followed natural patterns rather than human pruning. The result is more interesting and beautiful than either strict formality or complete informality would be. Within the areas defined by these hedges, plantings have taken on their own character. What might have once been formal bedding displays are now mixed communities of plants that have found their own relationships and balance. Self-seeded annuals grow among established perennials, creating combinations that no designer could have planned, but that work beautifully together. This evolution of the garden from formal to naturalistic represents the same processes that occur in all living systems: the tendency toward complexity and diversity, the way life finds its own balance when allowed to do so. The rain has accelerated and enhanced these processes, supporting the self-seeding and natural growth that has created this beautiful hybrid of formal and informal elements. You walk along what was probably once the main axis of this formal area, though the path now curves gently rather than running in a straight line. The rain continues its steady work, and you notice how it's created temporary streams along the edges of the path where water collects and slowly makes its way to lower ground. These temporary streams are like the garden's circulatory system made visible, showing how water moves through the landscape and connects different areas. The rain has revealed patterns of drainage and water movement that might not be apparent in drier conditions, adding another layer to your understanding of how this garden functions as a living system. At what was probably the focal point of this formal area, you discover another fountain, though this one is clearly not functional and hasn't been for some time. It's larger than the others you've encountered, with what appears to be a tiered design that was probably quite grand when it was working. Now, it serves as a large planter, with different levels providing different growing conditions for a variety of plants. This transformation of a formal fountain into a naturalistic planter is perhaps the perfect symbol of this garden's evolution. What was once a symbol of human control over nature has become a home for plants and small creatures, a focal point that serves the garden's ecosystem rather than imposing human will upon it. The bottom tier has filled with soil and organic matter over time, and now supports a small ecosystem of plants that have seated themselves in this elevated position. You can see small ferns growing in the crevices, and what might be moss covering much of the stone surface. The rain has turned everything dark and lustrous, and the overall effect is of a ruin that has been reclaimed by nature in the most beautiful way possible. This colonization of the fountain by plants is a beautiful example of nature's resilience and creativity. Given the opportunity, life finds a way to establish itself in the most unlikely places, turning human artifacts into habitat and beauty. The rain has enhanced this process, providing the moisture that allows these plants to thrive in what might seem like inhospitable conditions. Water collects in the various levels and depressions of this old fountain, creating temporary pools that reflect the gray sky above. Fallen leaves float on these surfaces, and you can see how the rain creates those same perfect circles that you've been observing throughout your walk. It's as if nature has turned this old fountain into its own art installation, one that changes with every rainstorm. The patterns created by raindrops on these collected pools are constantly changing, but also somehow eternal. Each circle is unique, but the process that creates them continues regardless of weather or season. This fountain has become a meditation on time and change, on the way natural processes continue regardless of human intentions or interventions. You walk slowly around this fountain, observing it from different angles. Each view reveals different details, the way plants have found footholds in what seemed like impossible places, the patterns created by water staining on the stone, the small communities of moss and lichen that have established themselves in the protected crevices. The rain seems to make everything more vivid here, from the deep greens of the moss to the varied grays and browns of the weathered stone. You can smell the mineral scent of wet stone mixed with the earthy aromas of the plants that have made this structure their home. It's a complex bouquet that speaks of time and weather and the slow processes that transform all human creations. From this central point, you can see several paths leading in different directions, suggesting that this was indeed the heart of this section of the garden when it was more formally maintained. Now, these paths have different characters, some more defined than others, some leading to areas that look more cultivated and others disappearing into wilder sections. The multiple path options from this central point create a sense of possibility and choice that adds to the garden's appeal. Each path promises different discoveries, different perspectives, different experiences. The rain has made all these options equally appealing, transforming each route into a potential adventure. You choose the path that seems to lead back toward the areas you haven't yet explored, drawn by the promise of new discoveries. This path is wider than some you've been on, but still has the soft, organic feeling that characterizes much of this garden. The surface is a mixture of gravel and organic matter, softened by the rain until your footsteps make almost no sound. The path's surface tells its own story of the garden's evolution. The original gravel has been supplemented over time by organic matter from falling leaves and the natural processes of decomposition. The rain has accelerated these processes, helping to create a walking surface that's both functional and beautiful, firm enough for easy walking but soft enough to absorb sound and blend with the natural landscape. The plantings along this path are diverse and interesting, showing evidence of both intentional design and natural processes. Shrub roses grow in abundance, their canes arching gracefully and creating informal hedges along the path's edges. Though the main blooming season is past, many still hold their hips, bright red and orange fruits that provide food for birds and add color to the autumn landscape. These rose hips are like natural ornaments, each one perfectly formed and glowing with its own internal light. The rain has given them an extra glossiness that makes them seem almost artificial in their perfection. They represent the rose's final gift to the garden ecosystem, providing food for wildlife and seeds for future generations of plants. The rain has made the thorns on these roses more visible, each one beaded with water that catches and reflects what little light penetrates the overcast sky. You're careful not to brush too closely against them as you walk, but you appreciate their wild beauty and the way they've grown into forms that are far more interesting than any pruned and managed rose garden could be. Among the roses, other plants have found their places, creating layered plantings that feel both abundant and natural. You can see the tall spikes of foxgloves that have finished blooming, their seed pods now providing food for small birds. Self-seeded calendulas still show a few brave flowers, their orange and yellow blooms seeming particularly bright in the muted light of this rainy afternoon. These volunteer flowers add unexpected touches of color to the autumn garden, proving that beauty can appear anywhere when conditions are right. The rain has intensified their colors and made them seem even more precious for their rarity in this season of more muted tones. The path curves again, and you find yourself walking along what appears to be the edge of a larger meadow area. Here, the garden transitions from more cultivated plantings to something that feels almost wild, that you suspect there's more management here than is immediately apparent. This transition from garden to meadow creates another shift in scale and perspective. The intimate plantings give way to broader views and larger gestures, but the rain continues to provide unity and continuity. The change in scale is dramatic but not jarring, suggesting skilled design that knows how to create variety while maintaining coherence. Tall grasses dominate this meadow area, creating a prairie-like landscape that moves and flows in the gentle breeze. The rain has weighted down the seed heads, creating graceful arcs and curves that add to the sense of movement and life. Different grasses bloom and set seed at different times, so even now, late in the season, there's variety in color and texture. This grassland represents a different approach to gardening, one that works with natural plant communities rather than imposing exotic species on the landscape. The rain seems particularly at home here, as if this is the kind of environment where it naturally belongs, where it can do its essential work of supporting native ecosystems. Among the grasses, you can see the dried stalks of wildflowers that bloomed earlier in the year. Black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, and what might be wild bergamot create vertical accents among the flowing grasses. Even in their dormant state, these plants have architectural interest, and the rain has brought out the subtle colors in their dried seed heads and stems. These seed heads and dried stalks represent the meadow's provision for winter wildlife. They contain seeds that will feed birds through the cold months, and their hollow stems provide shelter for beneficial insects. The rain is part of this ecosystem's annual cycle, helping to break down last year's growth while providing moisture for next year's seeds. You notice that there are paths mowed through this meadow area, not formal paths, but routes that allow access while preserving the natural character of the space. You can see one of these paths leading away from where you stand, disappearing into the tall vegetation like a secret route through a wild landscape. These mowed paths represent a perfect balance between access and preservation, allowing visitors to experience the meadow without damaging its ecological integrity. The rain has made the mowed strips more visible, creating temporary contrasts in color and texture that will disappear as the grass grows back. The sound of rain on all this vegetation is different from what you've heard in other areas. Softer, more muffled, as if the abundance of plant material is absorbing the sound and transforming it into something gentler. You can hear the rain moving through the different layers of vegetation, from the tallest grass plumes down to the ground level, creating a complex audio texture. This layered sound environment is like a natural orchestra, with different plants contributing their own voices to the overall composition. The rain conducts this orchestra, determining the intensity and rhythm of the performance. Standing here in this meadow, you feel like you're in the middle of a living symphony. Birds are clearly active in this area despite the rain. You can hear different calls and songs, but the singers remain hidden in the vegetation. There's something about this wilder area that seems to attract more wildlife, and you find yourself walking even more quietly, not wanting to disturb whatever dramas and daily routines are playing out unseen around you. The presence of more diverse bird life in this meadow area suggests that it provides habitat that the more cultivated areas of the garden cannot. The native plants offer food sources and nesting sites that exotic ornamentals don't, creating a more complete and supportive ecosystem for local wildlife. The path you've been following curves back toward the more cultivated areas of the garden, but before you leave this meadow section, you pause to take in the overall scene. There's something powerful about this landscape, the way it suggests larger ecosystems and natural processes, the way it provides habitat for creatures you'll never see, the way it demonstrates that gardens can be both beautiful and ecologically functional. This pause allows you to appreciate the meadow as a complete ecosystem rather than just a collection of individual plants. The rain has unified everything, making the connections between different species more visible and emphasizing the interdependence that makes natural communities function. The rain continues its work here just as it has throughout your walk, but somehow it seems even more essential in this setting. You can almost feel the moisture being absorbed by roots and soil, becoming part of the complex web of relationships that sustain this mini ecosystem. It's a reminder that rain is not just something that happens to the landscape, but something that the landscape actively participates in and depends upon.